everyone, it's Clare at West Highland Herbal here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make fruit leathers as part of my seasonal cookery videos. So we're using apples that I've picked from our allotment here in Loch Allen and brambles, so it's a nice classic combination, apple and blackberry fruit leather. So I've foraged for these brambles over the past few days. Two additional ingredients that you'll need are honey. I tend to use an organic honey, and one lemon, the juice of one lemon. The equipment that you'll need to make fruit leathers: a chopping board, a knife, a peeler, a stick blender or a food processor, or alternatively you could use a sieve and a spoon. And the additional equipment is a heavy bottomed pot and a dehydrator if you have one. If you don't have a dehydrator, you can use just your oven, a cool oven, and you can roll out your fruit leathers on trays with some baking parchment paper. So to start off, what you're going to need to do is peel your apples. So at this point I also cut off any bits of apple that are starting to rot or going bad or looking a bit discoloured. So keep your peel, because we've got an exciting additional recipe that we're going to do at the end with the peels and with the cores of the apples. And once you've peeled your apples, then you can cut them into quarters and take the cores out. So you put your cores into the same pile as your peelings and keep them for later. So once you've peeled and cored and chopped your apples, it's time to get them cooking. So I'm just going to cook the apples really gently over a low heat until they've formed a puree, and then at that point we'll be adding the brambles. While you're waiting for your apples to cook, you can get your dehydrator trays ready. So that involves lining them with baking parchment. My dehydrator's got round trays with a hole in the middle, which isn't the best setup for making fruit leathers. So if you've got a dehydrator that's got square or rectangular trays, it's much easier. If you're not using a dehydrator, you can just line a baking tray with the parchment paper, and then that can go in the oven once you're ready. What I tend to do with my trays is roll out the parchment paper, and then take a pen or a pencil and draw around the outside of the dehydrator tray so that you've got a nice tight fit, and around the inside circle as well, because what we're going to be putting in here is quite liquid, so you don't want it kind of spilling all over the place. And then once you're finished, it should hopefully look something like this. So you've got a kind of donut shape going on there. And it should hopefully slot in just like that. After about 15 or 20 minutes of cooking, your apples should be nice and soft. So take them off the heat. And you want them at a consistency where if you press down with the back of a spoon, they should break up. Don't worry if you've got a few lumps in the puree, because we're going to be blending this mixture anyway. And so at this point I would be adding my blackberries. So I usually go for a mixture of about half and half apples to half blackberries. But it doesn't really matter if you want to go more apple or more blackberry, you can adjust it to your own taste. So while the apples are still hot, pour your blackberries into the mix. And then you want to give them a good mix around with the spoon and leave them until the apple has cooled down slightly, maybe about 10 minutes or so. So I add the brambles at this point because I don't want to cook them, and I feel that it retains some of the beneficial compounds, enzymes present in the brambles that would possibly be destroyed upon cooking. So I just add them in at the end of the cooking of the apples, which helps to bring the temperature of the apples down, and it just gently breaks the cell membranes of the brambles without destroying the nutrients that are present there. So once you've given that a good mix, you want to get your lid back on the pot and leave it for 10 minutes to settle. So once your mixture's cooled after 10 minutes of sitting, so that it's easier to work with, you're going to want to puree it. So I'm going to use a stick blender. You could also use a food processor, or you could use a sieve and press the mixture through the sieve with the back of a spoon. I find the blender the easiest way to do this myself. So with the blackberries, you will have some seeds in the mixture, so if you do want to get rid of the seeds, I don't personally mind a few seeds in my fruit leathers, a bit of texture, but if you do want to get rid of the seeds, then you will have to press it through a sieve. So once you've pureed your mixture, you want it to be a consistency so it's thicker than soup, a lot thicker than soup. Alright, so you want it to be a kind of spreadable, pretty loose consistency. So at this point you want to add your lemon juice. So I just squeeze that straight in. Try and avoid getting any pips into the mixture, because you don't really want them in your fruit leathers. And you can also sweeten it up as well if you like, with some, I usually use organic, or maybe you could use some local honey if you've got beekeepers near you, or maybe you keep bees yourself. Or if you prefer not to use any sugar for whatever reason, health reasons or just for preference, you don't need to add honey. Okay, so now we're going to add our honey. So this mixture should be warm enough at the moment to dissolve the honey through it. So I'm going to use around 2 tablespoons of honey. You probably want to just add honey to your own personal taste. And again, there's another stray pip in here. Again, you want to mix this up so that the honey is well dissolved through the mixture. You don't want any big lumps. In fact, you could even use your blender again at this point to help dissolve the honey and remove any lumps. So once your honey is well dissolved, you can then take your trays that you lined . So I've got my dehydrator trays here that are lined with the parchment paper. And then you just want to take the mixture and spoon it onto the trays, onto the parchment paper on top of the trays. So this is quite a nice thick mix. The thicker that you spread it onto the trays, the longer time it will take to dry out. But if you spread it too thinly, you won't really have any substance to the fruit leather, so it's worth playing around with it to strike a balance. So you can see here with the trays that I've got the slight disadvantage of having the circle in the middle of the tray. It does make it a bit more awkward to put the fruit mixture onto the tray. Okay, so that's what your round tray should look like. Obviously if you have a square tray you can lay it out completely flat. And then you want to start loading up your dehydrator. While you're waiting, I'll show you something really useful you can do with your used up apple cores and peelings. So we're going to make apple cider vinegar. So you need a clean glass jar and your cores and your peelings from the apples, and also some filtered water or bottled mineral water. You don't want any chlorine in the water because that will inhibit the fermentation process that leads to vinegar. So we're going to just fill our jar almost to the top with the apple cores and peelings. So once your jar is nearly full, Then you can add your filtered water. So this is just from a normal kitchen water filter. Like I say, you can also use bottled water if you want. So then you just pour your filtered water over the top of your peelings and your cores. Make sure you cover them right to the top. And then just loosely fit the lid over the top. And that is the start of your apple cider vinegar. So you're going to leave this, make sure you get the air bubbles out of the side. So you're just going to leave this on your kitchen worktop and check it every day, and it should start to fizz after a few days. So that's the fermentation process starting. So what will happen is it will get really, really cloudy, and then it should clear, and once it's clear, if you taste it, it should taste like vinegar, so you can just strain the liquid off. And then you can compost your apple peelings. Drying your fruit leather should take somewhere between 6 to 10 hours, depending on whether you're using a dehydrator or your oven and what the temperature is set at. Once your fruit leathers are dry, you can slice them and roll them up. I actually roll them in the baking parchment paper because that gives them some protection from the humidity and from degenerating, going off too quickly. So once they're dry, you can roll them up and store them in an airtight container, and they should last for a couple of months like that, if you don't manage to eat them all before then, which I often do. I hope you are really happy with the results of your delicious homemade fruit leathers. And remember that you don't have to stick to this particular recipe. You can completely mix it up, you know, substitute the apple for bananas that are overripe, or substitute the brambles for other soft fruits. Feel free to experiment and put your own stamp on this recipe and use what you have, use what's going to get wasted otherwise. I hope this video has been useful to you and you've enjoyed making your own homemade nutritious fruit leathers, and I encourage you to get into the kitchen and get creative.